Hello, my name's Tom Brady, and welcome to Open a Bottle by the Oxford Wine Company, a short-form version of the Oxford Wine and Spirit podcast. My guest today is Dean MacGregor, rum portfolio ambassador to Speciality Brands, looking after such delicious rums as Neisson, River Antoine Estate, Takamaka, and Clairin, the Spirit of Haiti. Today, though, we're talking Jamaican rum, and in particular, the tremendous rums of Hampden Estate. And I'm delighted to say that I have in my hands a bottle of Hampden Estate HLCF. A very warm welcome. I was hoping we could start today just by setting the scene a little bit on the island of Jamaica. There's so much to talk about here when it comes to the rum industry, but who are some of the key players and what are some of the brands we should be looking out for?
Yeah, as you say, Jamaica is a major player and always has been held in really, really high regard, not only just by sort of rum fans, but much outside of that as well. It's called breaches the category, and you'll get a lot of whiskey fans moving over. Nowadays is a perfect time to sort of get into Jamaican rum because they're having a bit of a renaissance. As you say, there's some big players in the Jamaican rum industry. No one as large as sort of Ray Nephew. That is the icon of the island. 6 million bottles for 3 million people every year. I think that sort of sums up Jamaican sort of consumption and the sort of style of rum it really is. But most people will know Hampden Estate as well. Hampden Estate, again, who are tied in with produce Ray and Nephew. Huge producer, very iconic distillery. Joyce Spence, the first female master blender in the spirits industry. She is absolute legend. You've got Worthy Park, another distillery that has recently sort of started redistilling. They're sort of two of my favourites anyway. You've also got the guys from Long Pond and National Rums Jamaica at Clarendon, producing some delicious liquid too, as well as Hampden Estate. So Hampden Estate have been around for centuries, but again, since only 2018, you would have really seen bottles like this popping up. Relatively new sort of brand, but a very old distillery with heaps and heaps of heritage.
People talk a lot about a style of Jamaican rum, and what do we mean when we're talking about this?
When talking about Jamaican rum, the words that kind of get thrown around are sort of funky and fruity and overripe fruit. That is kind of the case, but not always. You say so a lot of this, like Hampden owns the largest share of sort of Jamaican rum, if you like, and they are very well balanced sort of pot, column still distillates. It's incredibly delicious. But what people sort of categorize Jamaican rum is sort of very traditional, very pot still, very fruit, very flavor driven, very big, bold, turning everything up to 11 essentially. And on the sort of nerdy sort of side of things, they were sort of the last of the major islands to kind of embrace column still distillation. So they have been making those beautiful, bright, very full-bodied, unapologetically big and very Jamaican kind of sense.
Jamaica is one of these islands that I like to cite to anyone who tries to claim that rum as a category is lawless or Wild West or any of these terms. But to be characterized as Jamaican rum, what has to be in that bottle?
What has to be in that bottle? It's good to see sort of islands sort of discussing and having their geographical indicators kind of certified. It gives a bit of ownership to the island and also gives the general public and the consumer a bit more confidence of what exactly is in the bottle. As you say, that hasn't historically been well known in the rum industry. As you say, people still think it's lawless, and the amount of articles you see from educated people and journalists saying that rum is lawless still is completely wrong. So each island will have their own sort of rules, their regulations. They've got their own language, their own culture, everything, and their own way of making rum too. And the Jamaican one has been sort of certified, and the distilleries and the government came together. I think it was 2016. They put in a GI, which means all of the liquid in the bottle has to have come from Jamaica, has to have been fermented and distilled in Jamaica, has to have been aged in Jamaica in American white oak casks or a variety of other casks, as we're seeing getting experimented with. And another sticking point is no sugar added. Obviously, rum is made from sugarcane, or molasses, but it means no sugar added after distillation or maturation at all. And they feel very strongly about that. Well, most people do.
I mean, there are a couple of brands that I feel maybe would if they could, but
Yeah.
we can move on from that anyway. I think it is really, really great to see Jamaica sort of sticking with this GI. And at the end of the day, it's only going to heighten the kind of gravitas and the esteem of rums coming from this area. And personally, I do feel like it's leading the way as well. It's a kind of statement of intent and a sign of quality. And if Jamaica can be a leader in this, then it means that other places and other places have followed suit. And for me, that's just going to elevate the rum category altogether. So kudos to Jamaica, and let's see more of it. Let's step away and talk about Hampden Estate, because for me and for a lot of rum people, this is a really, really hyped distillery. There's a lot of fondness in the rum community for the products that are produced by Hampden Estate. And they've got a really interesting history. So I don't know if you could give us a little sort of York Notes version of the Hampden Estate story.
So Hampden is a very, very traditional, very, very old distillery. It's been there since the 1750s, but the brand itself has only been around since 2018, since they've been bottling their own aged stock. And it's amazing how well it's known already, since it's only been around as a brand since the tail end of 2018, which is when I started with Speciality Brands. But the distillery itself, I say, has been making rum pretty much non-stop since 1753, when it was founded, like many, by a Scotsman. So there's lots of Scottish, lots of British, went over to Jamaica. A guy called Archibald Sterling. There's some great names in the Hampden story, by the way. And he's pretty much set up a plantation, started growing sugar like many, many did at that era and that time, and then built a big, great house about 1779 to sort of flaunt his wealth, essentially. And that great house actually remains today, which is quite rare, actually. So they've managed to maintain it, and it's used now as a kind of visitor centre, used as a visiting house for the family that own it now and the visitors. Fast forward 100 years, and they sold it to another Scottish family called the MacGregor Lawsons. Again, incredible name. They are kind of praised with the sort of starting of Hampden Estate, a lot of the style of rum they produce today. So George MacGregor Lawson then handed it over to a guy called Dermot Owen Kelly Lawson, which for a lot of the rum fans out there might recognise his initials as DOK, which is like immortalised as one of the recipes in the funkier end of the Hampden's releases. And he basically created this sort of style and these methods that are still used, that pretty much bang on today at the distillery. So they were always producing rum, a very, very high ester, which is like big, flavorful rum that that region got well known for, the Trelawney region, which is kind of northwest Jamaica, about like an hour outside of Montego Bay, if anyone's been there, to kind of give you a bearings. And then they were producing lots, just completely unaged. Nothing was kind of bottled or anything like that. It was put into casks or put into storage before it was shipped over to Europe or around the world. And then eventually in 2009, a Jamaican family called the Hussies / the Harris family, they own Everglade Farms, which is over in Trelawney in Jamaica. So it's a Jamaican family. And they bought the distillery in 2009. And in 2010, they had the idea of actually aging stock for the very first time. So prior to that, Hampden had never aged their stock. They had always pretty much just sold it in bulk to European brokers and blenders, or by casks in the 18 and early 1900s. And it's been praised as like a blending component, essentially, to sort of elevate rums. If something's missing, like a teaspoon of Hampden or a nice little glug of Hampden in there, a little goes a very long way, especially on the higher end of the esters, essentially. And they had the idea of bottling it. So they started laying down some casks in 2010. Prior to that, the only sort of aged stock from Hampden you'd find would be from the likes of Cadenheads and sort of indie bottlers in the UK and the likes of those guys. So you'd never have found sort of a tropically aged Hampden really on the market. So I think maybe around 2005, 2006, Christelle Harris of the Hampden family now, she brought over some aged stock over to the UK Rumfest, actually, and started sharing it around. That's where she met Sikinder Singh of the whiskey, or previously of the Whiskey Exchange, now of Elixir Distillers, and Luca Gargano. So Luca, for anyone that doesn't know Luca Gargano, he's kind of a giant in the rum world. He's been importing, exploring the world of rum and bringing it and giving some really, really exciting releases. So after that, that was when the sort of relationship between Le Maison and Bellier, throwing lots of names at you. That's the way that partnership sort of blossomed, if you like. So Hampden make exactly everything, and Le Maison and Bellier kind of look after the distribution side of things. And they've been going from strength to strength since 2018 onwards. It's amazing to see the sort of growth and how the interest that people really, really enjoying and getting to know Hampden. Particularly the sort of, so I was really quite happy about this, is when you decided to go for the overproof. It's a hell of a way to start a Monday morning, and I love it. And people are discovering the wonders of that is Hampden Estate now.
I mean, it really is an incredible story of something that, you know, from someone who was a bartender, probably hadn't heard of Hampden before 2018 to where it is now. It's really kind of one of these pinnacle distilleries at the sort of top of everything. You need to try Hampden if you want to know about rum. It's that kind of level now, which is really, really impressive. I mean, I heard somewhere that there was a point quite recently where more of what Hampden produced went into the perfume industry than the spirit industry. Is that correct, or is someone leading me on?
Yeah, they've got lots of strings to their bow, should we say, at the distillery. I think because of the style of rum they make and the amount of flavour and sort of the aromas you can get into it, it is praised for the perfume industry. There's a running joke at the distillery, it's Chanel No. 5, but I'm pretty sure it probably isn't, but it is used in the perfume industry. It's also used in the confectionery industry as well. So if you think kind of rum and raisin ice cream flavorings, boiled sweets, because of like the aromas and the flavor being produced, it's used in that as well as blending too. So yeah, they have quite the business actually. Their first bottling actually was a 63% unaged overproof rum called Rumfire. And that's where Jamaica would have been introduced to Hampden, really, their first release. But we didn't get that in the UK until a few years back. So the aged stock is what most people know it for.
That all kind of segues nicely onto my next question, which is this reputation for Hampden Estate as being synonymous with these extremely powerful, full-bodied, rich, funky rums. Could you go into a little bit of detail about how the production team are achieving all of these characteristics in the final spirit that gets released?
I thought I knew how all rum was made until I visited Hampden. It's a real eye-opener. It is kind of like stepping back 100 years and seeing how things were produced then. I'll try and keep it short because it is quite complicated, and but it is very, very unique. They kind of, to break it down, they kind of say they have 5 pillars for their rum production, and one of those is wild fermentation, which again you don't see a huge amount in sort of big commercial distilleries at all. So you pick up those wilder, so really long, low and slow, essentially fermentation using nothing but airborne wild yeasts. They use 100% pot still as well to maintain that oiliness, that sort of aroma, and the sort of the boldness of the rum too. But they don't add anything to their rums, so there is no sugar, no caramels or anything, and not any filtration. They use natural spring water from a local source, which is about a couple of kilometers away from the distillery. They've always used that. And then everything that is aged in this bottle has been 100% aged in Jamaica as well, to sort of really, really capitalize on the sort of local temperatures and the local climates and things like that. But how they make the rums. So the 8-year-old is 100% molasses. But when we get to the HLCF Classic, the overproof, you start using sort of a few other ingredients that you might not be familiar with. So they use molasses. They also use something called sugarcane vinegar, or some people hear it called acid. That is essentially when you take fresh sugarcane, crush that to remove the juices from the estate. They then leave that in a big tank and just basically let it ferment for a very, very long time, up to a few months, where it turns into sort of more of a vinegar. So basically like an acetic acid kind of concentrate, if you like. They also use some fabled terms in Jamaica, which also get thrown around. You might have heard of dunder before. That is a term that has been used in Jamaica for centuries. In fact, the American whiskey industry sort of took that technique and they called it sour mashing. So whatever's left in your pot still after distillation won't necessarily have any alcohol in it, but it will have lots of acids and aromas and flavour. So we take that, we call that the dunder. We store that again into some wooden vats. Dunder, short for redundant. It sounds a lot cooler though, as dunder. They also use natural spring water, which is, again, very, very important. Any distiller will tell you how important their water source is. And the last kind of secret sauce is the muck. People hear this, the muck pit of Jamaica, all the time. But to actually see one in the flesh and warts and all, get the full aroma from it too, you really need to visit Hampden. And that essentially is where you have your different fermentation vats, all fermenting over time, kind of the skimmings from the top of it, the waste from the fermentation vats, the cane trash, and everything kind of gets put into this pit. It's more of a channel, actually, that goes throughout the fermentation room. And that essentially just evolves over time and creates a huge amount of sort of different acids and aromas. And through that long fermentation, it picks up a huge amount of flavor. And then when added to the other 4 ingredients, so the molasses, the cane juice vinegar, the dund of the water, a few days before the end of the fermentation, they, like a bath bomb, essentially, they drop in a measured amount of the muck, which kind of just basically really sort of sets things off, kind of supercharges the aromas. And that's how you get the wash, the fermenting. And then that will go into the stills. There's 6 pot stills, double retort pot stills now. All comes off for about sort of around 8 hours, comes off around 82-ish, 80% before it goes into the cask or gets rested for rum fire. So quite complicated, but all of those different steps are put in place for producing sort of very aromatic, very flavorful rums. And they've been doing it ever since and haven't really changed that kind of secret. There are a couple of secrets which I don't know, obviously, or understand, but that is essentially how all Hampdens are made. And they actually produce 8 different marks, which are essentially different recipes, which are different ratios of those 5 ingredients and different ferment times. So this is a relatively short for Hampdens, about a 7-day fermentation with butt. They do go up to 3 weeks in some cases. But if you compare that to a 24, which is 48, which you'll find used mostly across distillers, it's very, very long. And that long ferment gives lots of time for the yeast and the bacteria to kind of set in, have their nibble, have their say, produce lots of acids and aromas. I keep saying that. And when the alcohols and the acids kind of start to react and kind of play together, that's when you get those beautiful aromas, that beautiful esters, that fruit, that pineapple, that strawberry, that creaminess, that banana. All of that starts to become really, really present in the rums. Yeah, very unique. Took me a while to get my head around it when I visited it.
I love it. I'm a bit of a geek myself, and flavor production is something that I just absolutely love, kind of figuring out where it all comes from and kind of when you taste the rum, tracking what's happened for it to arrive at this stage. So, I mean, it's something quite special for me and something that makes me really, really excited to talk about what we've got in these bottles right here.
Yeah.
So Hampden Estate, pure single Jamaican rum, HLCF classic. When we say HLCF, what are we talking about?
Yeah, as I mentioned briefly, Hampden make lots of different recipes, and they make 8 recipes now. And each of those will have a different aroma, a very different style of rum. And as they kind of go up, they kind of get heavier. And to kind of let them stand apart, they will all give those recipes names, which get shortened down to little acronyms, essentially. So they could be letters, they could be numbers. Sometimes they've got little hearts and little diamonds and things like the original emojis, if you like. And each of them are kind of differentiated by that. HLCF Classic stands for Hampden Light Continental Flavored. As you can probably tell straight away, there's nothing light about this, but this was the kind of lightest in sort of profile rum that Hampden made until the 50s. And so Hampden Light, that's relatively self-explanatory, but the continental flavored part doesn't mean there's only flavoring in it. It means that this particular style of rum that's created was used as a flavoring component in Europe, particularly Germany, actually. Germany was a huge market for Jamaican rum, as was the UK. And in the turn of the sort of early 1900s, the Germans put on more tax levies of imported goods, basically, to sort of inspire home distilling and people to enjoy spirits in Germany, basically. But Jamaican rum was still very, very popular. So the Jamaicans started producing more and more flavorful rums, packing more flavor, and essentially sending less rums, but something that could be diluted down. And that's essentially what was done. It was used to make something called Rumverschnitt, which is still used today. You'll sometimes see it as German Jamaican rum, but it's very much either a beet spirit or neutral grain spirit, which has then been kind of like, well, Wimbledon's coming up, and the sponsor's always Robinson Squash, so it's kind of like that. They kind of use it like that as a cordial, essentially. A little bit of rum, a little bit Jamaican, just to add that, make it pop. But yeah, they've got it the HLCF Classic. They're kind of leading the way, I like to think, in kind of the education sort of side of that with some of their releases of what the different marks are. And where it says pure single Jamaican rum, that's essentially a nod to sort of how the whiskey industry has always sort of categorized themselves with pure single malt whiskey, which was originally promoted in the 1960s. Single distillery, malted barley, a product to Scotland. So they're kind of using that kind of terminology now in rum instead of the white, gold, and dark, which gives you no indication of what this is in your glass anyway. So pure single rum means pure, means nothing's added to it, nothing's taken away. Single, so it's a single pot still, single distillery, essentially. Similar language to the Scotch.
Fantastic. I mean, I think this was Luca Gargano that came up with this classification, right? And in the last podcast that we did on rum was with Pete Holland, and we talked about a pure single blended rum because it was a blend of pot and column still together. So I think it does kind of, one, it sort of demystifies how these rums are made. It creates a talking point like that. But again, it goes back to what we discussed at the beginning, where you're actually giving something a classification. And when something has a classification, you get an idea that this is actually a bit serious and we're not just mucking about and throwing whatever in. So, I mean, I'm all for that. And of course, I mean, I always think it's absolutely hilarious. This is a Hampden Light, continentally flavored. It makes absolutely no sense to me, but I mean, particularly in the nose here, immediately, I mean, what strikes me straight away is the amount of fruit that comes through, and it's not just kind of citrusy flavors. There is a real kind of pineapple-y character as well on the nose here, pineapple and biscuits. And there's something I always get with these rums, and I mean the German link as well, Stroopwafels. That's a kind of the sort of little waffly kind of biscuit, sugary things that you find in Germany and Poland, and that seems to always come up on the nose for these rums for me. In terms of maturation, what sort of cask makeup are we looking at with these rums?
Well, this one in particular is 100% ex-bourbon casks, so American white oak, which is where most of the brand are. So the sort of the flagships of the brand are the 8-year-old, which is with the green label, and the HLCF Classic Overproof. So they're the kind, and Rum Fire, of course, but that isn't matured. And those ones are 100% ex-bourbon. But they have had a couple of releases recently over the last few years called the Pagos, which kind of have experimented solely in kind of European oak and just ex-sherry casks, which were very, very exciting. They did finish building and opened about a year and a half, 2 years ago, a new aging warehouse as well. So they're really sort of investing in their future at Hampden. Since the Hussey family have taken over, they've imported 2 more. As I said, they used to have 4 double retort pot stills, and now they have 6. So production's gone up to try and keep up with demand, which is great. It's a great problem to have. So they're really sort of investing in the future and laying a lot more stock. So you'll see a lot more exciting releases coming from Hampden over the years.
And in terms of the age of the liquid in this bottle, is this a blend of older and younger rums?
So this one is relatively young, but it's 4 years old. However, it is aged in Jamaica for 4 years. So the Jamaican have about an angel share of about 8% per year. And it is a lot more, I know it's quite warm here today, but it's nothing like the humidity and the heat of the climate in Jamaica, which again, I'm sure Peter would have mentioned it, as the sort of the tropical aging. Different climates and different temperatures will obviously sort of impact that cask, which used to be a living and breathing thing in itself. So it has pores, will kind of react very differently to the sort of more temperate climates we're used to over here. So you will get sort of accelerated maturation. Those tropical notes really sort of popping, a lot more vibrancy, tropical vibrancy. You've already pointed out like beautiful juicy fruits. That's from those beautiful esters and those sort of fruity aromatics that are produced during the fermentation, which are key there. They are just sort of accented, kind of elevated a little bit from the maturation. But yeah, it's like overripe fruit. So the pineapples are really, really juicy, and their crowns are kind of browning. The bananas are like a bit spotted black. That's when they're best to eat, by the way. Don't eat green bananas; they're gross. Let them ripe. And this one actually,
let's do it. Let's get in there.
Let's get in. I know it's
That's gorgeous.
a relatively high ABV at 60, but it drinks beautifully. It's just like the mouthfeel, beautiful pepperiness. Yeah, it's great.
I just think it's so juicy. I mean, it is the ABV is really kind of it's present there. This is really powerful, and it kind of needs to be. That's the style. That's what it is. That's what you'd be looking for. You'd be a little bit disappointed if it wasn't, particularly at 60%. But the fact that the flavor can still fill the palate, the fact that it comes across as a juicy liquid and not something that's overly spirituous, I would say, is a real testament to production. And the other thing as well is there's so much of that aroma that comes from the nose reappears on the palate as part of the flavor as well, which is, again, really impressive to see.
Yeah,
to be fair.
I love this one, particularly this mark, the HLCF. What Hampden have done as well, and Neisson, they have really looked into sort of what the build-up is, sort of chemically. It sounds a bit geeky, to kind of find out where those flavors come from. And they've kind of drawn off these, like, all these different graphs and things. And it kind of proves that, like, the HLCF classic is probably the more complex of all the marks. If you're kind of looking at the sort of the different aromas and the complexities and the different, as you say, the different fruitiness, everything in it, it's by far, I think, it is the more complex. Yeah, and you say, if you leave this an hour and come back, and it would have filled the room by then. The aroma, there's no escaping it by this point. It's out the bottle. But the more you approach it, the more you add water to it, the more it will play, the more it will change. It's great. So the main stick, people see the 60%, and I think it puts the fear into them. But no, you need to embrace it. People love cask strength whiskey, but as soon as you say 60% rum, kind of a very different reaction.
I think it's wonderful. Any final thoughts on this rum?
Just embrace it. I say there's nothing light about it anyway. So the name itself, light continental flavored, would have been very apt back in the sort of the early 1900s. But they do make lighter things from this now. But yeah, enjoy it. Like if the sticking point is the ABV, that's the joy of a higher ABV. You can dilute it to exactly how you want it. You can add some water, add some ice, however you're going to enjoy it. Play around with it as well. Play it with it in cocktails. Make them mean old-fashioned. I'm not going to lie about that one. And it's kind of younger, unaged counterpart rum fire as well. So that is an absolute beauty. Very recognizable by the bottles on the flames on the bottle. But yeah, this one is if the kind of, I don't want to say the gateway to high ester rums, but it's definitely definitely up there.
It's standing loud and proud, that's for sure. Dean, thank you so much for taking us through this rum, the Hampden Estate HLCF. Before we leave you, there's just enough time for some shameless shout outs. How can we follow you, Dean, and the brands that you represent online?
So on Instagram, I am Dean and his rum. So yeah, if you want to follow me, that's nice. Brilliant. If you want to. Hampden Estate, they have a good presence on socials and things like that as well. So just Hampden Estate on most of the social things like that. Or if you want to sort of look at our broader portfolio, Speciality Brands, speciality.brands.ltt, that you'll find outside of rum as well, agaves, everything like that. You can find all of our brands on there. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to shout out, but Mictas, Siete, Mysterios, Nico, Takamaka, obviously, and all our rum portfolio. Blacktop, as we are approaching July. Yeah, we can find all of those either on my Instagrams or on Speciality Brands one too. Or you can go to the Oxford Rum Show.
I love it. Cheers, mate.
No,
Brilliant
thank you very
time
much.
to have a rum on a Monday morning.
Yeah, cheers.